My name is Cassandra Wilson, though most people simply call me Cassie. I'm 34 years old, and everything shifted last Tuesday when I scanned my lottery ticket and realized I had just won $47 million. My hands trembled as I stared at the six perfectly matched numbers. Once the initial shock faded, an unusual thought took hold. I wasn't going to tell a single soul about this money. You see, money and my family have a messy history. If you're watching this right now, leave a comment with where you're tuning in from. And before I dive into the decision that changed everything, hit like and subscribe to hear more true stories about family loyalty and betrayal that might just make you rethink your own relationships. Up until that life-altering Tuesday, my existence had been painfully ordinary. I worked as an accountant at a small Portland marketing firm, making enough to get by somewhat comfortably, though never securely. My apartment, a modest one-bedroom on the city's outskirts, wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Every morning, at 6 a.m., I'd brew my coffee and begin my day with the constant hum of financial anxiety, the bills, looming deadlines, and the weight of just getting by. 60-hour workweeks had become standard, especially during tax season. Family life was, to put it lightly, complicated. My parents, Gregory and Diane Wilson, divorced when I was 14 and both remarried within 2 years. My dad, a high school physics teacher, married Stephanie, a real estate agent with a taste for luxury and a lifestyle to match. My mom found love with Warren, a successful businessman with more money than my father, but a vice grip on every dime. I have 2 siblings. Lisa, my younger sister at 30, has always been the golden child, an Ivy League graduate who married Paul, a surgeon. She lives in a gorgeous suburban home with their 2 picture-perfect kids. Jason, my older brother at 36, is charming and intelligent but chronically unmoored. He drifts from one job to another, one relationship to the next, and has practically perfected the art of borrowing money without repayment. His cycle never changes: a desperate call, an emotional plea, a promise to pay it back, then silence until the next crisis. Extended family wasn't much simpler. Aunt Martha, my mom's younger sister, was perhaps the most genuine person I knew. A schoolteacher living paycheck to paycheck, she still managed to show up when it counted. She drove an ancient, rattling Honda, lived in a tiny apartment overflowing with books and plants, and never once complained. Then there was Aunt Heather, my father's older sister, who married rich and never let anyone forget it. Holidays with her were an exercise in enduring constant criticism and backhanded compliments about my career, my apartment, and my perpetually single status. Her son, Ryan, inherited her entitlement but not her financial stability, and quietly battled a gambling problem the family pretended didn't exist. My own history with lending money left me bitter. When Jason needed $5,000 for rehab 3 years ago, I drained my modest savings only to learn months later he'd never even gone. When Lisa wanted help with wedding costs, I charged $2,000 to my credit card, trusting she'd repay me after the honeymoon. 5 years later, I was still waiting. When my dad needed a roof repair loan, I sent what I could, then saw vacation photos of him and Stephanie sipping cocktails in Cancun the next month. The only person who knew all of this was Charlotte, my best friend since college. Unlike most relationships in my life, ours had remained steady. A nurse who understood hardship, Charlotte never judged my resentment and reminded me not everyone was out to exploit me. Work wasn't much better. Arnold, my boss, regularly took credit for my ideas in client meetings. Derek, my coworker, slipped out early most days, leaving his unfinished tasks on my desk. Yet somehow, always managed to get the praise I deserved. I stayed quiet, kept my head down, and hoped my persistence would eventually pay off. My one guilty pleasure: lottery tickets. Every Friday, I'd stop at the corner store and spend $10 on them, a ritual my family mocked relentlessly. My mother called it a tax on people who can't do math. Jason said I should just hand the money to him instead of wasting it. My dad lectured me on probability and statistics. But I couldn't let go of that tiny glimmer of hope, a small chance at freedom. My dreams weren't extravagant. I wanted to travel beyond the Pacific Northwest. Maybe go back to school and earn a master's degree in something I loved. I wanted enough of a cushion that a car repair wouldn't send me spiraling into debt. But as I approached my mid-30s, still chipping away at student loans and juggling persistent credit card debt, those dreams felt increasingly far away. Each month was a balancing act of bills, groceries, and the occasional night out with Charlotte. I knew exactly which store had the cheapest coffee, which coupon saved me the most on laundry detergent, and which day's gas prices were lowest. I drove a decade-old Corolla that rattled whenever it rained, and I had perfected the art of looking fine while secretly calculating weather. I could afford a simple invitation out. That was my life, ordinary, sometimes hard, occasionally lonely, but steady in its own way. I never imagined one slip of paper could shatter and reshape it all. Ironically, the day I bought the winning ticket was my 34th birthday. After an exhausting week where Arnold once again claimed credit for my cost-saving strategy, I stopped at Gus's Corner Market, like always except this time, with a slight twist. "Happy birthday, Cassie," Gus called as I walked in. He'd owned the shop for over 30 years, knew every regular by name, and always had a kind word. "Thanks, Gus." "The usual and, maybe one extra for good luck," I said, handing him $20 instead of my usual $10 birthday splurge. "Huh, maybe today's your lucky day," he replied with a wink. Instead of my usual quick pick, I decided to choose the numbers myself. My birthday 3 and 16. My mom's 12, my dad's 21, Aunt Martha's 9, and Charlotte's 30. Numbers representing the people closest to me, even the ones who had hurt me. That evening, I ordered Thai takeout, opened the bottle of wine Charlotte gifted me, and settled in for a quiet solo birthday. The lottery drawing was at 8 p.m., but I barely paid attention. Scrolling through social media posts of acquaintances, enjoying far more glamorous celebrations. Around 8:30, I remembered the tickets and casually checked the numbers, expecting the usual disappointment. First number, 3. Slight grin. Second, 16. My pulse quickened. Third, 12, 21. By the fifth 9, my palms were slick. The final number, 30. I stared at my phone, certain I'd made a mistake. I checked and rechecked. I turned on the TV and rewound the drawing, watching each of my numbers appear in sequence. My hands shook so violently I dropped the remote. "No way," I whispered into the empty apartment. No way, the lottery website confirmed it. I was the sole winner of $47 million? After taxes, about $28 million, an unthinkable amount for someone who'd earlier been thrilled over a 10% coupon on detergent. Sleep. Impossible. Instead, I spent the night reading about lottery winners, and what I found terrified me: stories of greed tearing families apart, of friends and distant relatives materializing with sob stories and open hands. Many lottery winners go bankrupt within 5 years, often ending up even more miserable than before they won. One article I'd read described the lottery as the fastest route to losing everything you love. As dawn broke, I made up my mind. I would collect my winnings, but I wouldn't breathe a word to anyone, not my parents, not my siblings, and not even Charlotte, at least, not yet. I needed space to think, to plan, and to figure out what this money truly meant for my future before anyone else could tell me how I should use it. That morning, for the first time in 3 years, I called in sick to work. I also booked an appointment with Philip Montgomery, an attorney who specialized in estate law and financial planning. His office occupied a sleek high-rise downtown. Sitting in the reception area, dressed in my everyday clothes and clutching the purse that held my winning ticket, I felt like an imposter. "Miss Wilson," Philip greeted me warmly as he shook my hand. He looked to be in his mid-50s, with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes framed by expensive glasses. "How can I help you today?" Taking a steadying breath, I placed the ticket on his desk. "I need to claim this without anyone knowing I'm the winner." His eyebrows lifted for just a moment before his expression returned to professional calm. "I understand. You've come to the right place." For the next 2 hours, Philip carefully laid out my options. In our state, winners could stay anonymous by claiming their prize through a trust or another legal entity. He explained the steps to create a blind trust, how taxes would be handled, and why I needed an expert financial team to protect and grow the money. "The biggest mistake lottery winners make," he warned, "is telling too many people too soon. Once the secret is out, there's no undoing it." I nodded, relieved to have my instincts validated. "I want to handle this properly. I don't want this money destroying my life." By the time I walked out of Philip's office, I carried a thick folder full of paperwork and an outline of next steps. Excitement and dread swirled inside me in equal measure. The money was real now, sitting within my grasp, but I couldn't share my life-changing news with a single soul. Outwardly, I'd still be the same overworked accountant. Secretly, I was now a multi-millionaire. During the following 2 weeks, Philip and I worked closely to establish the blind trust, claim the prize, and open multiple investment accounts. We developed a long-term plan to ensure I'd never worry about money again. If I lived past 100, the funds were officially under my control. Yet my day-to-day routine didn't change. I still clocked in at work, griped about bills with my coworkers, and drove my old beat-up Corolla. Keeping the secret began to gnaw at me. I wondered constantly about my family. Would they celebrate my good fortune? Or would they see me only as an endless source of cash? The questions haunted me until an idea took shape. What if I could find out their true feelings before revealing anything? Lying awake one night, staring at the ceiling, I finalized my plan. I'd create a believable situation where I needed financial help. Nothing outrageous, just enough to test their willingness to help me when they had nothing to gain. The next day, I met with Philip again to make sure my accounts were airtight before putting my scheme into action. By then, we'd already set up a diversified investment portfolio, funds earmarked for charitable giving, and a modest account I could draw from discreetly. The bulk of the money was secure, untouchable except by me. Everything is in order, Cassandra, Philip reassured me, sliding another folder across his glossy desk. Your financial future is rock solid. You could walk away from your job today if you wanted. It was tempting, but I shook my head. Not yet. Quitting now would raise too many questions. I'll keep working until I figure out my next move. That evening, I invited Charlotte over for wine on my tiny balcony. She was the only person I trusted enough to share even part of my plan. I'm thinking about testing my family, I began carefully. Her brow arched. Testing them. How? I'll tell them I lost my job and need financial help. I want to see who steps up for me when there's nothing in it for them. Charlotte's face shifted from curiosity to concern. Cassie, that sounds manipulative. Why put yourself through that? Because I'm tired of being the one who helps everyone else, I replied, unable to meet her gaze. I need to know who'd be there for me if the roles were reversed. She frowned. Lying to test people. That doesn't sound like you. Why not just ask how they feel about you? I gave a bitter laugh. Right. Because my family is famous. For honest heart-to-hearts, you've seen how they treat me. Charlotte set her wineglass down, her expression softening. This feels wrong. Cassie, what are you trying to prove? I'm not trying to prove anything. I insist. We both knew that wasn't entirely true. I just want to know who actually cares about me, not just what I can provide. She shook her head slowly. I think you'll end up hurting yourself more than anyone else. But knowing you, you've already made up your mind. She was right. That same day I'd crafted the entire story. I'd say the marketing firm where I worked abruptly shut down after losing its biggest clients. I'd explain that I needed $5,000 to cover rent and medical bills until I landed another job. The amount was large enough to matter, but not impossible for most of my relatives. I even made a list of everyone I'd call. My mom, Diane, and her husband Warren. My dad Gregory and his wife Stephanie. My sister Lisa and her husband Paul. My brother Jason, Aunt Martha, Aunt Heather, and my cousin Ryan. 10 people, all of whom had leaned on me financially or emotionally at some point. Charlotte reluctantly helped me rehearse. You need to sound worried but not desperate, she coached. And have details ready about the company closing. Someone will ask. I nodded, jotting notes. I'll say the CEO was caught embezzling, the company's under investigation, and I probably won't get my last paycheck. And when they ask about your job search, she pressed. I'll tell them I've been applying everywhere. But the market's tight, especially for niche accounting roles. I've got a few interviews scheduled, but nothing solid. My emergency funds drained from medical tests. By the time I finished preparing, guilt flickered through me. Was Charlotte right? Was this too manipulative? But then I thought about all the times I'd emptied my own savings to bail these same people out. This wasn't about revenge. It was about self-protection. I even made predictions. Mom would probably offer something, but not the full amount. Dad would give me a lecture about budgeting, maybe send a token sum. Lisa would plead poverty because of the kids. Jason would claim he was broke. Warren and Stephanie would flat out refuse. Aunt Heather would judge my bad choices. Ryan would promise help that never came. The only one I truly believed might help was Aunt Martha. Despite being a public school teacher with little to spare, she'd always been generous. But even then, I tempered my hopes. $5,000 was no small request. The plan was set. Over the next week, I'd call each family member one by one, tell them the same story, and see who offered genuine help. Only then would I decide who deserved to know the truth about my lottery win. With a mix of fear and anticipation, I picked up my phone. It was time to start with my mom. Diane loved to remind us how much she'd sacrificed as a parent. If anyone would help, surely it would be her. My hands trembled slightly as I dialed her number. She picked up on the third ring, sounding distracted. "Hi, Mom," I said, layering my voice with strain. "Cassie, what's wrong? You sound upset." That was my cue. I launched into the story I'd rehearsed. The company shutting down, my unpaid wages, my shaky financial state. As I spoke, I could hear her breathing deepen, her concern rising with every word. When I finished explaining, she let out a sympathetic sigh. "Oh honey, that's awful," she said softly. "Have you tried applying for unemployment? And what about your emergency savings?" I told her that unemployment benefits would take weeks to come through, and my emergency fund had already been drained by recent medical tests for some troubling symptoms. I didn't specify what those symptoms were, letting her imagination fill in the blanks. Taking a deep breath, I added, "Mom, I hate to ask, but I really need help. Around $5,000 would cover my rent and medical bills until I can find another job. I promise I'll pay you back as soon as I can." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then she said carefully, "Oh Cassie, you know Warren and I just put a down payment on the lake house. We're pretty cash poor right now." Her tone grew a little defensive. "Have you asked your father? Or Lisa? Paul makes good money at the hospital." I was hoping to avoid asking Dad, I admitted truthfully. "And Lisa's already stretched with the kids and their private school tuition." "Well," she said at last, "let me talk to Warren and see what we can do. I can't promise anything. You know how tight he is with money, especially when it comes to, well, you know." I knew exactly what she meant. Warren had never seen me as his responsibility, making it clear from the start that his money was for my mother and any children they might have had together. They never did. "Sure, Mom. Just let me know soon." "Okay, rent's due next week." "I will, honey. I'm so sorry about your job. These things have a way of working out, though. Maybe it's a sign you should look into a more stable career." After we hung up, I recorded her response in a journal I'd started for this very reason. She had shown concern, yes, but quickly shifted the responsibility elsewhere. She hadn't outright refused, but I could already guess that her talk with Warren would conveniently end with them unable to help. The next day, I met my father, Gregory, for coffee. I chose a public cafe, hoping he'd be less likely to react harshly in front of others. "You look tired," was his only greeting as I sat down across from him. I gave him a faint smile and told him my story. He listened without much expression, occasionally nodding or frowning. When I finally asked for the $5,000, he leaned back, crossing his arms. "Cassandra, I've always preached financial responsibility," he began, sliding into his teacher voice. "This is exactly why I've told you to keep 6 months of expenses saved." "What happened to that plan?" "Life happened, Dad," I replied, struggling to keep the frustration out of my voice. "Medical bills, car repairs. Not everyone can afford to set aside that kind of money." He let out a heavy sigh. "And now you expect others to bail you out. What about your spending? Do you really need that apartment in that neighborhood? What about your cable and all those streaming services?" For the next 20 minutes, he lectured me about financial planning, the job market, and the need to live below my means. Not once did he offer real help. "I'd love to help you, Cassie," he finally said, patting my hand in a patronizing way, "but Stephanie and I are focused on our retirement. We can't dip into those funds. It would be financially irresponsible. This will be a good learning experience for you. Sometimes you need to hit rock bottom to make the necessary changes." I nodded, fighting back tears only, partly for show. Even though I had expected this, it still stung to hear my needs dismissed, so Isley. Next was my sister, Lisa. I drove to her immaculate suburban home on Saturday afternoon. Paul was out golfing, giving us privacy. "Cassie, what a surprise," Lisa exclaimed when she opened the door. "The kids are at swim lessons. Come in." Her house was spotless, furnished with expensive pieces, and every wall displayed a professional family photo. We sat in her sleek kitchen, sipping lattes from her high-end espresso machine. As I explained my situation, "Oh my God, that's terrible," she gasped, reaching across the granite island to squeeze my hand. "I can't believe they just shut down like that. Poor you." Her sympathy felt genuine, and for a brief moment, I felt hopeful if I mentioned needing to borrow $5,000. Her face changed. Oh well, it's actually not a good time. We just bought the new Audi, the kids' tuition came due, and we're remodeling the master bath. Paul handles our finances, and he's very strict about the budget. I understand, I said, quietly. I wouldn't ask if I weren't desperate. I know, she said quickly. Let me talk to Paul, maybe we can help with a smaller amount. Or you could move in with us temporarily. The guest room's full of storage right now, but we could clear it out. I thanked her, explaining that moving wouldn't be practical with my job search centered in the city. She promised a call after speaking with Paul, but the way she avoided eye contact told me all I needed to know. My brother Jason was, somehow, the most disappointing. After texting him a detailed message about my situation, all I got back was, "That sucks, sis. Really tight right now myself. We'll call you later." He never did. My follow-up texts went unanswered, and my calls went straight to voicemail. This, from the same brother who had borrowed thousands from me over the years with tearful promises to repay, none of which ever happened. My stepmother Stephanie didn't bother with sympathy when I called. "Cassandra, I understand this is difficult, but Warren and I aren't in a position to help. Maybe this is a chance for you to learn better financial management. Have you thought about downsizing your apartment or getting a roommate?" When I reminded her that I'd helped with repairs on their vacation cabin just last year, she bristled. That was different. That's a family property you also enjoy. The fact that I'd only been invited there once in 5 years apparently didn't count. Warren was even more blunt. "You are not my daughter," he said flatly when I called. "I've supported your mother for years, but your financial problems are yours. Maybe you should have chosen a more lucrative career." My cousin Ryan initially sounded sympathetic, promising to meet me for lunch and write a check. But an hour before our meeting, he texted that something came up and promised to reschedule. He never did and eventually stopped responding. Altogether, Aunt Heather's response didn't surprise me, though it still hurt. "Well, Cassandra, I always said that company seemed unstable. I told your father you should have taken that bank job after college, but no one listens to me." She then launched into stories about other relatives' financial hardships, and how they all managed without begging for handouts. That evening, Lisa told me Aunt Heather was already gossiping about my irresponsible spending. After a week of rejections, half-hearted promises, and cold silence, I was emotionally drained. My experiment had confirmed my worst fears about my family, but it still hurt to accept the reality. 7 people who had repeatedly asked me for help over the years wouldn't return the favor now that I needed them. Then my phone rang. It was Aunt Martha. "Cassie, sweetheart, I just heard from your mother about the job. Are you okay?" Her voice radiated genuine concern. I hadn't even reached out to Martha yet. I'd planned to call her the next day. The fact that she called me first after hearing secondhand spoke volumes. "I'm hanging in there," I admitted, my voice breaking with real emotion. "Listen, I want to help. Can we meet for lunch tomorrow?" My treat, of course. The next day, we met at a small diner near her apartment. Martha looked exactly the same as always. Silver-streaked hair pulled back into a simple ponytail. Jeans, a cardigan with mismatched buttons. She hugged me tightly before we sat down. "I'm so sorry about your job, sweetheart. That company never deserved you anyway," she said, as we ate. She asked thoughtful questions about my job search and even offered to reach out to some former colleagues with business connections. After our plates were cleared, she reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. "I want you to take this," she said, sliding it across the table. "It's $3,000. I know it's not the full amount you need, but it should cover your rent for now." I stared, shocked. "Martha, I can't take this. It's too much." "Nonsense," she said firmly. "Family helps family, and I want you to know something else." She reached across the table, squeezing my hand. "If you need a place to stay to save money, my sofa pulls out into a bed. It's not fancy, but you're welcome as long as you need." Tears welled. In my eyes, fully genuine this time. "Thank you," I whispered, overwhelmed by her kindness. "Don't worry about paying it back right away," she added gently. "Focus on getting back on your feet first. Make sure you find work you genuinely enjoy this time. Life's far too short to spend it in a place that doesn't value you," Martha reminded me as we stepped out of the diner. She pulled me into another hug and whispered, "You're going to be all right, Cassie. You're intelligent and capable. This is just a detour. Not the end of the road. On my drive home, I clutched the envelope in my lap. $3,000, an amount I knew Martha could barely afford to give. Her generosity stood in sharp contrast to the rest of my family's indifference. The only person who stepped up was the one with the least to spare. Later, I discovered the full weight of her sacrifice. The $3,000 was nearly her entire savings. Quietly battling complications from type 2 diabetes, Martha's medication costs had recently skyrocketed. She'd even taken on extra tutoring jobs just to cover her bills. Realizing this felt like a punch to the chest. Here was a woman who already had so little, yet she handed me almost everything she had without hesitation or expectation. Meanwhile, my mother had spent $8,000 on a bathroom remodel not long ago and still refused to lend me $5,000 for rent and medical bills. The next evening, I invited Martha over for dinner. As she sank into my old sagging couch, I noticed how tired she looked, fine lines etched deeper around her eyes than I'd remembered. Setting a steaming cup of tea in front of her, I began, "Martha, I need to confess something. I haven't been completely honest with you." Her expression remained gentle and curious. "What is it, sweetheart?" "I didn't lose my job. The company's fine, I still work there." The words rushed out. I lied about being unemployed because I wanted to see which family members would help me if I ever truly needed it. Martha was quiet for a few beats, then nodded slowly. "Are you angry?" I asked, terrified that I'd ruined the only authentic relationship I had in the family. She shook her head. "Not angry. Maybe a little sad that you felt you had to test us at all. But I do understand why. Our family hasn't always been fair to you. You were the only one who offered help," I admitted. "Everyone else had excuses or ignored me completely." Martha sighed softly. "People reveal their true character when generosity is inconvenient." Her words struck me, and I asked, "Did you learn that the hard way to—" She set her cup down, folding her hands. "Yes, my ex-husband Robert. Did I ever tell you the real reason we divorced?" I shook my head. The family version had always been vague. They grew apart. When my grandmother died, I inherited about $50,000. Not a fortune, but it meant a lot to us. Robert instantly started making plans to invest it in his friend's business. I wanted to save it for our future, maybe put a down payment on a house. We argued for months. Then, one day, I learned he had forged my signature and drained almost all of it. By the time I confronted him, the money was gone, sunk into a restaurant. That failed within a year. When I demanded an explanation, he told me it was our money, and he had as much right to it as I did. As if my name on the inheritance meant nothing. She gave a bitter smile. The family preferred the tidy growing apart story. It's less messy. I reached for her hand. "I'm so sorry. I had no idea." She squeezed my fingers gently. "The point is, some people see you as a resource instead of a person. It's a painful lesson, but it taught me something valuable about money and relationships." Looking at me earnestly, she added, "Cassie, money doesn't just expose who other people are. It shows us who we are too, how we handle it, share it, and talk about it. It's a powerful mirror." Her words echoed inside me. I drew in a breath. "There's something else you need to know." "Something huge. I won the lottery 3 weeks ago for $7 million. Her eyes widened, but she stayed silent, waiting. "I haven't told anyone else. Not my parents, not Lisa or Jason, not even Charlotte. You're the first to know." "Oh, Cassie," she breathed. "That's life-changing." "I know. That's why I tested everyone. I needed to see who would stand by me without knowing about the money." Martha nodded. "I understand, but what now?" "That's what I'm still figuring out. The money's safe, and I've got good financial advisors. But I don't know how to deal with the family." "You don't owe them anything, Cassie, not even me," she said softly. "But I want to help you," I insisted. "With medical bills, maybe, a better apartment, whatever you need." Her smile was tender. "Sweetheart, I don't need anything. My life is full of things I love. My apartment is small but cozy. My car works most days. I have my students, my books, and now this amazing secret with my favorite niece. Knowing you're safe and happy is more than enough." Tears stung my eyes. Martha had already given me nearly everything she had when she believed I was desperate. And now, knowing I had millions, she asked for nothing. That night, as we kept talking, the difference between Martha and the rest of my family became even more glaring. During my experiment, word had spread among them about my supposed financial troubles. Instead of reaching out with kindness, most had only gossiped and judged. A text buzzed on my phone from my mother. Heard you asked Lisa for money. 2. You should have told me you were hitting everyone up, it feels manipulative. Another message followed from my father. Stephanie says you've been calling the family for handouts. This is exactly the kind of irresponsible behavior I warned you about. Their reactions confirmed everything I needed to know. They saw my hardship as a character flaw, not an opportunity to show compassion. The morning after my talk with Martha, I met with Philip, my financial planner, to map out my future. With clarity about my family, I felt ready to make decisions. With open eyes, I want to set up a trust for Martha, I told him. Something that covers her medical needs and ensures she can retire comfortably, but in a way that feels like a gift, not charity. She's proud. Philip nodded, jotting notes. We can create a family trust that pays her a monthly stipend. That way she won't feel burdened managing a large lump sum. Perfect. I also want to buy her a modest house near wherever I am. Settle. Nothing extravagant, just safe and accessible for her health. For the next hour, we discussed investments, a charitable foundation, and my own plans. I decided to leave my accounting job and launch a non-profit to help elderly people living alone. Inspired by Martha and so many others in her situation, Philip asked carefully, "What about the rest of your family? Will you tell them about the lottery?" Not now. Maybe never. But I do want to clear the air about my fake financial crisis. Later that day, I called Charlotte and finally told her everything: the lottery, the test, the fallout. After the initial shock, she understood. So what now? You going to turn into one of those eccentric millionaires who still clips coupons and drives a rusty car? She teased. I laughed. No, but I'm not buying Bentleys either. I want this money to matter, to do good, and I'm starting with Martha. She deserves it. And the rest of them? The ones who failed your test? Charlotte asked. I'm still working that out. I called a family meeting for this weekend, told them I have an important announcement. When Sunday came, I was shocked that everyone actually showed. My mother and Warren arrived first, followed by my father and Stephanie, then Lisa and Paul. Even Jason showed up, despite ignoring my calls for weeks. Aunt Heather walked in scowling, and finally, Martha entered last, giving me a small, knowing smile as they settled into my cramped living room, glancing around with judgment and curiosity. I stood before them feeling surprisingly calm. Thank you for coming, I began. I know there have been rumors about my finances, and I wanted to set the record straight. My mother shifted in her seat. Jason focused on his phone like it held the secrets of the universe. Lisa and Paul traded wary glances. The truth is, I'm fine. I found a new job with better pay and benefits. This was technically true, as I'd appointed myself executive director of my nonprofit with a modest salary. I'll be transitioning into that role next month. That's wonderful, my mother said quickly, relief washing over her face. I noticed the tension ease around the room. They had likely come bracing themselves for another plea for money, or perhaps to lecture me about my supposed poor choices. Instead of bad news, they were getting good news that required nothing from them. So why all the drama about needing money? My father asked, his tone edged with accusation. Why ask everyone for help if you already had a job lined up? I met his gaze steadily. The job only came through recently. When I was in trouble, I reached out to my family. Isn't that what family is supposed to be for? An uncomfortable silence filled the room. Well, we all have our own financial commitments, Stephanie replied defensively. It's not always possible to help, even when we want to. Of course, I said calmly. We all have to make choices about our priorities. I turned to Jason. Speaking of which, Jason, I noticed you never responded to my messages when I needed help. Yet you had no problem asking me for $3,000 last Christmas to cover your rent. He flushed with embarrassment. I was going through some stuff. I didn't have any money to give you. You didn't even call me back, I pointed out. That would have cost nothing. The meeting continued in the same vein, with me, calmly but firmly addressing the hypocrisy and lack of support I'd experienced. No one admitted to any wrongdoing. There were excuses, justifications, and even attempts to shift the blame back onto me for making them feel guilty, as they filed out after an uncomfortable hour. I felt an unexpected sense of closure. I hadn't told them about the lottery win, but I had stood up for myself in a way I never had before. The money had given me something perhaps even more valuable than wealth itself. The courage to see my relationships clearly and set boundaries accordingly. Martha stayed behind after everyone left, helping me gather the coffee cups and plates. You did well, she said softly. That couldn't have been easy. It was actually easier than I expected, I admitted. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of disappointing them because I realized their opinion of me was never based on who I really am. Martha smiled. That's a powerful realization. So, what happens next? Next, I said with a grin, we start looking for houses for both of us. A year later, my life looked nothing like it had on the day I discovered those winning lottery numbers. I had moved into a beautiful but modest home in a quiet neighborhood, complete with a garden that brought me joy each morning. Just 3 blocks away stood Martha's new home, a single-story craftsman with wide doorways to accommodate her walker on the difficult days when her diabetes acted up. My nonprofit organization, My Second Family, had grown far beyond my expectations. We provided companionship, home repairs, and financial assistance to elderly people living alone, focusing especially on those estranged from their families. The work fulfilled me in a way my accounting career never had. We'd already helped over 200 seniors in our city. Charlotte eventually joined as our outreach coordinator, bringing her nursing expertise and compassionate heart to our mission. She and I still had our weekly wine nights, though now they happened on my comfortable patio rather than in my cramped apartment. My relationship with my family had shifted more distant, yet far more honest. I maintained occasional contact with most of them, polite birthday calls and holiday gatherings. But the pretense of closeness had finally fallen away. Without the unrealistic expectation of emotional intimacy that had never truly existed, our interactions became less painful. None of them knew about my lottery winnings. As far as they were concerned, I had simply found success through nonprofit management. Their lack of curiosity about the details told me everything. I needed to know about their true interest in my life. There were moments when I was tempted to reveal the truth, like when Jason called asking for money for a new business venture, or when Lisa complained about the cost of her kitchen renovation. But each time I remembered their silence when I had needed help, and the choice became clear. Interestingly, there were times when my family genuinely needed assistance. When my father had a minor heart attack and faced unexpected medical bills, I anonymously paid them through the hospital's patient assistance fund. When my cousin Ryan finally entered rehab for his gambling addiction, I secretly covered the cost of his treatment. They never knew the source of these gifts, and I preferred it that way. Martha and I still had dinner together at least twice a week. Her health had improved dramatically with proper medical care and less financial strain. Though retired from teaching, she volunteered at a literacy program 3 days a week, sharing her love of books with children who needed it. You know what still amazes me? She said one evening as we watched the sunset from her porch. How differently everything could have turned out if you had announced your lottery win right away. I nodded thoughtfully. The family would have suddenly become very attentive and loving, I imagine. And you'd never have known what was real, Martha added. That knowledge, painful as it was, gave you freedom. She was right. The experiment had been painful, but illuminating. It showed me who truly deserved a place in my life and who didn't. It revealed the real nature of relationships I had spent years trying to fix despite their fundamental imbalance. The greatest lesson wasn't about others, it was about myself. Before the lottery, I defined my worth by what I could give to others. Constantly trying to earn love through sacrifice and generosity, I allowed myself to be used because I believed that's what family meant, that's what love required. Now I understood that real love, the kind Martha had shown me, doesn't keep a balance sheet. It gives freely without expectation of return, but it also respects boundaries and dignity. It's honest and consistent, present in both good times and bad. I initially kept my winnings secret out of fear. Worried money would corrupt my relationships. What I hadn't expected was how that secrecy would clarify them, instead stripping away pretense and revealing the truth. The money hadn't changed who anyone was. It simply illuminated who they'd been all along. My life now was rich in ways that had nothing to do with my bank account. Through my foundation, I had found purpose. Through Martha and Charlotte, I had found genuine connection. And most importantly, I'd developed a hard-won understanding of my own worth, something no external validation could shake. Perhaps the greatest gift was peace. The constant anxiety about finances that had haunted me all my life was gone, but so too was the desperate need for approval from those incapable of giving it. I had built a life aligned with my values, not my insecurities. Martha reached over and patted my hand, pulling me back to the present. You did good, kiddo. Not just with the money, but with what you learned. I smiled at her, overwhelmed with gratitude for the woman who had shown me what family truly meant. I had a good teacher. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here, from the shock of those matching numbers to the pain of rejection to the joy of creating something meaningful with my unexpected fortune. The money had changed my life, yes, but not in the ways I had feared or hoped. It simply gave me the freedom to see clearly and choose wisely. The most valuable thing I gained had nothing to do with millions in the bank. It was the understanding that the people who deserve a place in your life aren't those who stick around when you have everything to give, but those who stay when you have nothing left to offer but yourself. Have you ever had to test someone's loyalty? What did you learn from that experience? Share your stories in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, hit like and subscribe for more real-life lessons that might change your perspective. And remember to share this with someone who needs to hear that their worth isn't defined by what they can give to others. Thank you for listening. May you find the clarity to recognize the true relationships in your own life.